The morning air is crisp, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and freshly turned soil. I stand on my porch, coffee in hand, watching as Daisy and Buttercup, my 2 Jersey cows, lazily graze along the fence line. Their golden brown coats shine under the soft light of dawn, tails flicking in slow, lazy motions. This is my piece. My little piece of land, 3 acres of rolling green, nestled right on the edge of their neighborhood, the Lakewood Estates HOA. I take a slow sip of coffee, letting the heat settle in my chest. My great-grandfather bought this land nearly a century ago, back when the area was all farmland and black families like mine had to fight tooth and nail just to own property. Now, million-dollar homes sit on top of what used to be fields. And the people living in them, the Deborah Lancasters of the world, like to pretend history started when their custom-built houses went up. I exhale, setting my mug down. That's when I see them. A cluster of HOA board members in their usual uniform, khakis, polo shirts, and smug entitlement, marching up the sidewalk like an advancing army. Leading the charge is her, Deborah Lancaster, the self-appointed queen of property values and neighborhood aesthetics. She's got that look on her face. The one she gets when she's about to fix something, like my house, my land, me. Platinum blonde bob styled to perfection, pearls resting just above the neckline of her crisp white blouse. Even from here, I can see the way she turns her nose up at my cows, like the mere sight of them offends her. I already know how this conversation is going to go, Mr. Carter, she calls as they reach my front gate, voice dripping with fake sweetness. We need to discuss an important matter regarding your property. I cross my arms, leaning against the porch railing. Good morning to you too, Deborah. What can I do for the HOA this time? Her lips press together in a tight line before she recovers, offering a smile so forced it might crack. We've received several complaints about the livestock on your property. She says it like the word itself is dirty. I raise an eyebrow. My cows? Yes. While we understand you've had them for some time, they unfortunately do not align with the community's aesthetic standards. There it is. Aesthetic standards. A flicker of movement catches my eye. Behind Deborah, a few of my neighbors have stepped outside, watching from their porches. Most of them stay quiet, pretending not to notice. Others, like Mr. Harris, an older black man who's lived here longer than I have, shake their heads, already knowing where this is headed. I turn back to Deborah, my voice even. My cows aren't going anywhere. She smiles. But there's something sharp behind it. Well, she says, pulling a neatly folded document from her folder, we'll just have to see about that. Something is off. It starts small first, my mailbox disappears. One morning, it's right there, black metal, sturdy, standing tall by the road. By sunset, it's gone. Vanished without a trace. Then, my trash bins don't get picked up. I call the city. They say there's no record of my address on the route. Coincidence? Maybe, but then my water pressure drops to a trickle. A quick call to the county reveals a work order was placed, by someone who sure as hell wasn't me, requesting a service disruption for planned renovations. That's when I know this isn't just HOA policy enforcement. This is a slow, deliberate attack, and I don't need a crystal ball to see whose fingerprints are all over it. The next time I see Deborah Lancaster, she's at the neighborhood clubhouse, smiling and sipping Chardonnay with a group of HOA board members. It's a gated clubhouse, technically open to all residents, but everyone knows that doesn't include people like me. Still, I walk in anyway, conversations slow as I step inside. The laughter dims. Deborah doesn't turn around immediately, but I see the way her shoulders stiffen, how she takes a deliberate sip of her wine before finally facing me. Mr. Carter, she says smoothly, as if we're old friends catching up. What a surprise. I don't bother with pleasantries. Someone placed a work order to have my water shut off. That wouldn't happen to be an HOA matter, would it? Her lips twitch, amused. Oh dear. That does sound frustrating. But the HOA doesn't handle utilities. A few of the board members chuckle. The kind of laugh people use when they know they have the upper hand. I stare at her, reading between the lines. She's enjoying this. I lean in slightly, keeping my voice low. I know what you're doing. She doesn't flinch. Just swirls her wine, watching the liquid catch the light. Mr. Carter, she says, feigning concern. You seem awfully paranoid. I clench my jaw. Paranoid. A word like that carries weight when used against a black man. She tilts her head, her voice light. Wouldn't want people thinking you're unstable. The message is clear. She's not just trying to get rid of my cows, she's trying to make my life hell. Trying to make me a problem, so that when she finally does come for my land, no one will bat an eye. I force a slow breath through my nose, keeping my anger in check. I don't intimidate easy, Deborah. Her smile doesn't waver. But there's a flicker of something in her eyes for the first time. I think she realizes, neither do I. By the time I get back home from the clubhouse, the violation notice is already on my door, big, bold letters. Final warning, immediate removal of unauthorized livestock required. Below that, a threat. Failure to comply will result in legal action and potential property seizure. I crumple the paper in my fist. This isn't about property values. It never was. This is about power. About making me bend. About forcing me to know my place, and I refuse. The HOA weaponizes the law the next morning. I call my lawyer. They can't legally take your land, she assures me, flipping through the county's property laws. Your property predates the HOA. You're grandfathered in. I exhale, tension easing just slightly, but, she adds, and my stomach tightens again, they can make your life hell through zoning loopholes. Noise complaints. Sanitation ordinances. Animal welfare reports. They'll keep pushing until something sticks. Right on cue, a white county truck pulls into my driveway. A stocky man in mirrored sunglasses steps out, clipboard in hand. Animal control. I meet him halfway. He barely looks at me before scanning my property. We got a report about neglected livestock. I glance at Daisy and Buttercup. They're in their usual spot by the fence, tails swishing, ears flicking. Healthy. Well-fed. I fold my arms. Neglected how? He checks his clipboard, voice flat. Malnourishment. Unsafe conditions. Excessive waste buildup. It's bullshit. I've taken care of animals my whole life. My barn is clean, my cows are in prime condition, and there isn't a single law saying I can't have them. I keep my voice even. You want to inspect? Go ahead. I step aside, watching his every move as he walks the perimeter. He checks the water trough. The hay supply. Even runs a hand over Buttercup's coat, muttering under his breath. Finally, he sighs, tucking the clipboard under his arm. They're fine. No citations. No violations. But as he turns to leave, he gives me a long, unreadable look. I'll be back if we get another complaint. I already know they will. Deborah's next move the next morning. It's parking violations. A tow truck idles at the edge of my driveway. The driver shrugs, pointing to my pickup. HOA called it in. Says it's parked improperly. Improperly? I stare at my truck, parked in my own damn driveway. Then I see Deborah, standing on the sidewalk, arms folded, watching. Smiling. I walk over, heart pounding. This is harassment. She tilts her head. It's policy enforcement. I take a step closer. You're not going to win. Her smile doesn't waver. We'll see. Gathering the troops that night, I make calls first to my lawyer. Then to local reporters. Then to neighbors who've been burned by the HOA before, and finally, to Mr. Harris. He's lived here longer than me. Longer than even Deborah. His house is smaller now. His grandkids begged him to move, but he's too stubborn to leave. When I tell him what's happening, he listens carefully, nodding. Then he leans back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. Son, you ready to hit him where it hurts? I grin back. Absolutely. The HOA tries to silence me the next morning. I wake up to a cease and desist letter, not from the HOA, from Deborah's personal attorney. IT accuses me of defamation for speaking to the press. Warns me of legal consequences if I keep making false accusations against her. I laugh. Out loud. She's scared, which means I'm winning. Raising the stakes that night, I sit on my porch, watching the sunset. Daisy and Buttercup chew lazily on their hay, unaware of the war brewing around them. Then, crack. I freeze. The sound is sharp. Loud, like splintering wood. My eyes dart to the fence, where a section has collapsed inward. And standing there, next to a man in a maintenance vest, is Deborah holding a clipboard. She smirks. Looks like your fencing is in violation of safety codes. You have 24 hours to fix it. Or we'll have to remove the animals for their own protection. I clench my fists. This is war. The next morning, Deborah is waiting. She stands at the edge of my driveway, flanked by two other HOA board members, pale, smug, and radiating entitlement. Behind them, a tow truck idles, ready to haul my cows away. Next to it, an animal control officer, this one different from the first, flips through a clipboard. His uniform is crisp, his expression unreadable. This isn't just an inspection, this is an execution. I step off my porch, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me rush. Deborah's smile is pure victory. Mr. Carter, she says, her voice coated in artificial politeness. "We're here to enforce the final ruling on your livestock violation." She gestures to the clipboard. The animal control officer clears his throat, reading aloud, "As per Section 14 of the Lakewood Estates Community Standards, the presence of livestock is deemed a violation of property aesthetics and health ordinances. Due to multiple complaints and repeated non-compliance, the HOA has authorized removal." The tow truck engine rumbles. Chains clatter as a worker hops down, ready to load up Daisy and Buttercup like they're abandoned junk. I cross my arms. "You don't have the authority." Deborah's smirk deepens. "Actually, we do." She pulls out a document, waving it like a trophy. "Signed and approved by the county zoning board. Effective immediately." I take a slow breath. They think they've won, they think they've cornered me, but they don't know what I know. I let a moment of silence stretch between us before I speak. "You really should read the fine print, Deborah." Her smile falters. "Just slightly, what?" I reach into my back pocket and pull out my own folder. Thick. Stuffed with documents I've been collecting for weeks. I flip open the first page and read aloud, "State Law 38B, Grandfathered Agricultural Properties. Any land designated as agricultural prior to residential zoning retains livestock privileges indefinitely." I look up, locking eyes with the animal control officer. "That includes my cows." He shifts on his feet. Frowns. Deborah stiffens. That's not," I cut her off second. I continue, flipping pages. "Lakewood Estates HOA does not have legal jurisdiction over my property. My house was built before the HOA was formed, meaning their bylaws don't apply to me." I hand the papers to the officer. He scans them, eyebrows knitting together. Deborah's fingers twitch around her clipboard. This isn't." I take a step closer, lowering my voice just enough. "You've been weaponizing the system against me. Filing fake complaints. Harassing me. And you thought no one would notice." I pull out my final card, a USB drive. "This," I say, "is footage of your maintenance crew deliberately damaging my fence. Security cameras don't miss much." Deborah's smirk vanishes. I press on. "And this?" I pull out my phone and hit play. A recording crackles to life. Deborah's voice, clear as day. "Wouldn't want people thinking you're unstable. We'll just have to see about that." Oh dear. That does sound frustrating. The exact moment she tried to gaslight me, the animal control officer's frown deepens. The HOA board members shift uncomfortably. Even the tow truck driver stops and stares at her. Deborah pales. This is ridiculous." She whirls on the officer. "You don't seriously believe," he interrupts, "I'm going to need to make a few calls." I fold my arms. Deborah's world starts cracking, and I'm about to shatter. A long, suffocating silence stretches across my driveway. Deborah's once smug expression hardens, her grip tightening around her clipboard like it's a shield. Her eyes dart between the animal control officer, the HOA board members, and me, calculating, searching for a way out. But there isn't one. Not this time. The animal control officer finishes reading through the documents I handed him. His jaw shifts, and when he looks back up at Deborah, his expression is stone cold. "Mrs. Langley," he says, voice clipped, "I see no legal justification for livestock removal. Mr. Carter's property is fully compliant with state and local regulations." He turns to the tow truck driver. "You're dismissed." The tow truck driver shrugs, hops back in his truck, and drives off. One piece of Deborah's plan gone. I watch her chest rise and fall in quick, shallow breaths. She plasters on a smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes. "Officer, I understand you're just doing your job," she says, voice saccharine sweet. "But I have multiple complaints from neighbors, all of which," I cut in, "were either falsified or instigated by you." Deborah's eye twitches. "That's a serious accusation." I smile. "Oh, I know." I hold up my USB drive again, letting it catch the morning light, but lucky for me, I have evidence. The HOA's house of cards collapses. The HOA board members exchange nervous glances. They were confident, cocky, even when they thought they had me trapped. But now, they're squirming. I pull out my laptop, set it on the hood of my truck, and plug in the USB. Within seconds, the security footage plays on the screen. A grainy but clear video of 2 HOA maintenance workers, both wearing the official HOA logo on their shirts, standing by my fence. One pulls out a crowbar and smashes the wooden beams apart. The other laughs, mumbling something about how Deborah said to make it look natural. A low murmur ripples through the small gathering. The animal control officer narrows his eyes, his suspicion now fully formed. But I'm not done. I turn up the volume and press play on the recording of Deborah's voice, her own words sealing her fate. "Wouldn't want people thinking you're unstable. We'll just have to see about that." Oh dear. That does sound frustrating. Each sentence is dripping with the condescension, gaslighting, and veiled threats she used against me. And now, she can't take them back. The board members start whispering among themselves, their faces pale. The animal control officer crosses his arms, then, a new voice cuts through the air. I think we've heard enough. The witness that seals it, we all turn. Mr. Harris stands at the end of my driveway, cane in one hand, manila folder in the other. The retired judge. The one man in this neighborhood who knows the law better than anyone, and the one person Deborah didn't expect to show up. He walks toward us, slow but steady, his presence alone commanding attention. Now, he says, flipping open his folder, let's talk about HOA corruption, fraud, and abuse of power. Deborah visibly tenses. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do. He pulls out a stack of documents and hands them to the board members. Over the past 5 years, you've been selectively enforcing HOA rules, targeting homeowners based on race, personal grudges, and financial status. Deborah shakes her head furiously. That's absurd. Is it? Mr. Harris asks. Because I have written complaints, dozens, from other residents you've harassed. The board members flip through the pages. Their faces shift from uneasy to downright alarmed. These are real, one of them mutters. These are signed affidavits. Mr. Harris nods slowly. Not to mention, we have proof of HOA funds being misused. Unauthorized fines. Illegal property liens. I believe the county will be very interested. That's when Deborah panics. Deborah's last stand. She snaps. This is a setup, she shrieks. You're all against me. This isn't fair. She spins on her board members, desperate now. You knew what we were doing. You all signed off on the fines. Don't act innocent now. The board members immediately recoil. We didn't know. One starts. We trusted you. Another mutters, stepping away like she's radioactive. Deborah turns back to me, fury overtaking her. You did this. You ruined everything. I keep my voice calm. Steady. No, Deborah. You did this. She lunges toward me, but Mr. Harris casually steps between us, raising a hand. I'd be very careful, Mrs. Langley. Because as of this moment, the HOA's actions are under investigation. Deborah freezes. Investigation? That's right. The animal control officer nods. And based on the evidence presented here, I'm filing an official report. A fresh wave of murmurs rolls through the crowd. More neighbors have gathered now, watching, whispering. The realization hits Deborah like a train. She's not untouchable anymore. The final blow. The board members walk away. The crowd disperses, but the whispers linger. The last thing Deborah hears before she stumbles back to her car is a neighbor muttering, she's finished. And she knows it's true. The fall of Deborah Langley. Deborah doesn't show her face for the next few days. The once proud HOA president, the woman who patrolled our neighborhood like a queen inspecting her kingdom, is suddenly silent. Invisible, but the damage is already done. Within 48 hours, the news spreads like wildfire. The county compliance office launches an investigation into the HOA's shady practices. Several homeowners step forward with their own horror stories: unlawful fines, forced sales, racial discrimination thinly veiled as property concerns. Then, the real bombshell drops. The local news catches wind of the scandal. A reporter, a sharp-eyed woman with a microphone and an attitude that says she takes zero nonsense, shows up at Deborah's house. Cameras rolling. Mrs. Langley, are you aware that dozens of homeowners have filed complaints against the HOA under your leadership? No answer. Do you have a response to allegations of racial discrimination in HOA enforcement? The front door slams shut, but the damage is done. Within a week, the HOA board removes Deborah as president, citing gross misconduct. And then, because karma has a way of finishing the job, the county auditor discovers misappropriated HOA funds, thousands of dollars in unjust fines, unapproved projects, and personal expenses tied back to Deborah. When the police car pulls up to her house, the neighborhood watches in stunned silence as an officer knocks on her door. Deborah steps outside, looking worn, small, a far cry from the woman who once sneered at me from across the HOA meetings. The officer speaks to her. She argues. Waves her hands in the air, but then, the handcuffs click, and just like that, she's done reclaiming my peace. I step outside the morning after her arrest, coffee in hand. It's quiet. Peaceful. The kind of peace I haven't felt in months. I take a slow walk past my fence, now fully repaired. My cows graze lazily, tails flicking. No one's harassing me. No one's sending me threatening HOA letters or calling animal control with false complaints. For the first time in a long time, I can just breathe. A car pulls up beside me. It's Mr. Harris. He steps out, leaning on his cane, a satisfied smile on his face. Hell of a week, huh? I chuckle. You could say that. He glances at the pasture. Glad to see the cows are staying put. Oh, they're not going anywhere. I grin. And neither am I. A community awakens. The most surprising part of it all. The neighborhood changes. The next HOA meeting, now run by a new, more diverse board, several homeowners stand up and admit their silence. One woman, a middle-aged realtor who once signed a petition against my cows, stands with tears in her eyes. I should have spoken up sooner, she says. I ignored what was happening because it didn't affect me. I see now that I was part of the problem. A murmur of agreement sweeps through the room. Heads nod.it doesn't erase what happened. But it's a start. The final word. A few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, from the HOA, and my hands tighten on the envelope for a moment. Old habits. But when I open it, I blink in surprise. It's a formal apology. Signed by the entire new board, and at the bottom, a handwritten note from the new president. Your cows are a staple of this community. We hope they'll be here for years to come. I laugh. Damn right they will. I fold the letter, tuck it in my pocket, and head back inside. Outside, my cows graze under the morning sun, and for the first time in a long time, I know I've were